My daughter walked into my house with a lawyer and papers she expected me to sign. Then she saw the man sitting beside me and stopped dead in the doorway. That happened on a Thursday afternoon at 1:57. I remember the time because I'd been watching the clock. But to understand why my daughter Emily showed up at my house with an attorney, you have to go back about 6 months to the week I retired. My name is Robert Mercer. Most people call me Bob. I'm 67 years old and I've lived outside Franklin, Tennessee for more than 30 years. For 34 of those years, I ran Mercer Commercial Electric. It wasn't some giant corporation. I started with a used Ford Econoline van, a toolbox my father gave me, and enough money to keep the lights on at home if nothing went wrong. Plenty went wrong, but the business survived. By the time I retired, I had 26 employees, a warehouse off Columbia Avenue, and customers scattered from Franklin up into Nashville. My wife Marianne used to say I retired 3 years too late. She didn't get to see me do it. Cancer took her when she was 63. After that, work became easier than going home. So when I finally sold the operating side of the company to my foreman Caleb Morris, I didn't throw a party. Caleb and I signed the final papers on a Tuesday morning. We shook hands, drank terrible office coffee, and I drove home before lunch. My daughter Emily called that evening. "So that's it?" she asked. "That's it. You're officially retired unless Caleb changes his mind by breakfast." She laughed. Then she asked, "Did you get enough for the company?" I looked through the kitchen window at Marianne's bird feeder. "I'll manage." That was all I said. I didn't tell Emily the details because I'd never discussed money much with anyone except Marianne and my attorney. Apparently, "I'll manage" sounded like I'm broke. A couple of weeks later, Emily invited me to lunch at the Cracker Barrel off I-65. She was 38, then married to Jason Carter, a commercial real estate agent. They had a daughter, Sophie, who was 11. Emily spent 10 minutes talking about Jason's new listing before she leaned forward. "Dad, seriously, are you okay? I'm eating meatloaf at noon on a Wednesday. Life's pretty good. I mean financially." There it was. "I'm fine. Because retirement is expensive. So I've heard." She lowered her voice. "You didn't exactly plan this early." I almost corrected her. Instead, I took another sip of coffee. "I'll be all right, Em." Something changed after that lunch, not all at once. That would have been easier to recognize. Sunday phone calls became every other Sunday, then every third Sunday. I'd text her on a Friday. "Want to grab lunch tomorrow Monday afternoon?" "Sorry, Dad. Crazy weekend. Maybe soon." I told myself she was busy. People have jobs. Kids have soccer practice. Houses need fixing. Then Thanksgiving came. Emily called the Monday before. "We're going to Jason's family this year." "Oh, his mom already made reservations." "That's fine." "You sure?" Of course, I wasn't sure. Thanksgiving afternoon, my neighbor Frank Delgado came over carrying a foil pan. Frank had retired from the Postal Service and treated retirement like an Olympic event. He put mashed potatoes on my counter. "My daughter made too much." "Your daughter lives in Arizona." He stared at me. "All right." "Kroger made too much." I laughed. We ate turkey at my kitchen table while the Lions game played in the living room. Frank pointed his fork at me. "Look at the bright side. My mashed potatoes don't ask about your 401k. I laughed harder than the joke deserved. Christmas wasn't much better. I made Sophie a jewelry box from walnut I'd kept in the garage for years. Marianne had picked out that board before she got sick. Sophie loved it. Emily barely looked at it. Jason gave Sophie a new iPad. Everybody gathered around while she opened it. I stood near the Christmas tree holding an empty coffee cup. Driving home that night, I remembered something Marianne once told me. When people think you have nothing to give them, you learn why they were coming around. At the time, she'd been talking about one of her cousins. Now I wished I couldn't remember it. By February, Emily had stopped visiting altogether. I kept finding excuses for her. Maybe I'd become difficult after Marianne died. Maybe I talked too much about work. Maybe I hadn't asked enough questions about Emily's life when she was younger. Those thoughts can keep an old man awake longer than coffee. Then one afternoon, I ran into Jason's mother, Susan, at Publix. She smiled too brightly when she saw me. "Bob, how are you doing?" "Pretty well." Really, I looked at her. Should I not be? She immediately became interested in the oranges. Then she said, "Emily mentioned retirement has been challenging." That got my attention. "What did she say?" Susan hesitated. "You know Emily. She worries." "Susan." She sighed. "She said you didn't plan very well." I felt something tighten behind my ribs. Then Susan made it worse. She was wondering what you might eventually do with the house. I stared at her. My house. Susan finally realized she had stepped into something. I probably shouldn't have said anything. No, I said. Probably not. I drove home with groceries in the passenger seat and sat in my driveway for almost 10 minutes. The house was paid for. The taxes were current. I wasn't asking anyone for money. Yet somehow my daughter was already discussing what would happen to my home as if I were a problem waiting to happen. That evening I ate leftover chili alone. At 8:14 my phone buzzed. Emily. For one hopeful second, I thought she might be checking on me. Then I read the message. Dad, we need to discuss your estate before something happens. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the table. The refrigerator hummed behind me. Outside, a pickup rolled slowly down the street. I thought about all the years I'd worried whether Emily had enough. College, her wedding, the down payment on her first house, emergency repairs. I had never once asked what I would get back. Now I was retired 6 months and my own daughter was already discussing my estate. I picked up the phone again. My first instinct was anger. My second was worse. I wondered whether Marianne had seen something in our daughter that I had refused to see. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Finally, I sent only 4 words. What do you mean? Emily's answer came less than a minute later. We should talk in person. I sat there staring at those words. For the first time since retiring, I wasn't worried about being lonely. I was worried about why my daughter had suddenly decided she needed to see me. Emily didn't come over right away. Instead, she started calling. 3 times in 4 days. That alone told me something was wrong. For months, I'd been lucky to get a text back before the weather changed. Suddenly, my daughter wanted to know what I'd eaten for dinner. On Tuesday evening, she called while I was cleaning up the garage. Dad, how have you been feeling? Fine. No dizziness or anything. I stopped wiping down my workbench. No. What about your medications? I take 1 pill for cholesterol. I know. I'm just checking. The next evening, she asked whether I still drove after dark. Thursday, she wanted to know if I'd ever forgotten to pay the electric bill. That one almost made me laugh. Emily, I was an electrician for 34 years. If they shut my lights off, I'd take it personally. She didn't laugh. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen thinking about those questions. Health, medication, memory, bills, driving. They weren't the questions of a daughter casually checking on her father. So Friday morning, I called Daniel Reeves. Daniel had been my attorney for almost 25 years. He'd handled business contracts, Marianne's estate property purchases, and enough other paperwork that he probably knew more about my finances than I did. His office was in downtown Franklin above a small insurance agency near Main Street. When I arrived, Daniel was eating almonds out of a plastic container. He looked at me over his reading glasses. You look irritated. My daughter thinks I'm losing my mind. That would irritate me. I explained the phone calls. Daniel stopped eating. Has she asked you to sign anything? Not yet. He put the lid on the almonds. She will. I didn't like how quickly he said it. You think she's after money? I think questions about memory, medication, driving, and bills all in the same week deserve attention. I leaned back. She's my daughter, Dan. I know. She wouldn't. I couldn't finish. Daniel didn't help me finish. He simply said, don't sign anything without reading it. I drove home annoyed with him. That sounds ridiculous now, but I was. I wanted Daniel to tell me I was imagining things. Instead, he treated Emily like someone I needed protection from. For the next week, nothing happened. I started feeling embarrassed about the whole thing. Then Saturday morning at 10:23, Emily pulled into my driveway. No warning. She came through the front door carrying a loaf of banana bread. That worried me more than the lawyer had. You baked, she gave me a look. Yes, Dad, I can bake. You haven't baked since you nearly set off the smoke alarm making brownies in 11th grade. Very funny. She put the loaf on the counter. We made coffee. For about 15 minutes, everything felt normal. She told me about Sophie's school project. I told her Frank had bought a leaf blower powerful enough to relocate small furniture. Then Emily folded her hands around her coffee mug. Dad, I've been thinking. There it was. About what? You shouldn't have to worry about all this stuff anymore. I looked around my kitchen. What stuff? Bills, insurance, the house, paperwork. I don't worry much. You know what I mean. Actually, I didn't. Then she reached into her purse and removed a blue folder. My stomach sank. She pushed it toward me. This is just something that would let me help if anything happened. I opened it. Emily kept talking while I read. You know, if you got sick or had an accident, somebody needs to be able to handle things. I recognized the phrase durable power of attorney almost immediately. That wasn't automatically suspicious. Marianne and I had both had powers of attorney, but this document was broad. Financial accounts, real property, contracts, tax matters. I turned another page. Emily reached for her purse. I marked where you sign. I looked up. You already marked it, just to make it easier. I closed the folder. I'm not signing this today. Her expression changed. Why? Because I haven't read it. It's standard. Then it'll still be standard tomorrow. She leaned back. Dad, this is what I'm talking about. What are you talking about? You make everything difficult. I stared at her. You brought legal documents into my house without telling me and expected me to sign them over coffee. They're to protect you. Then I'll have my lawyer read them. That landed badly. You need a lawyer to deal with your own daughter. I need a lawyer to read legal documents. Her face tightened. So you don't trust me. I trust myself enough to read before I sign. Emily stood. She left the banana bread. The front door closed hard enough to rattle the framed photograph hanging beside it. I sat there for several minutes. Then I photographed every page and sent them to Daniel. He called 40 minutes later. Bob, do not sign these. I wasn't planning to. This grants very broad authority. Can she take my house? Not simply by waving this paper around, but if executed, it would give her significant control. More than I'd recommend under these circumstances. I rubbed my forehead. Maybe she's genuinely worried. Daniel was quiet. That bothered me. What? There's something else you should know. He had received a call 2 days earlier from my sister Linda. Emily had apparently told her I was becoming forgetful. Linda hadn't believed it, but she'd been concerned enough to ask Daniel whether I'd updated my estate planning. I felt cold. She told Linda that. Apparently she's told more than Linda. That hurt worse than the documents. For the next few days I went over every possible explanation. Maybe Emily was scared after losing her mother. Maybe my retirement made her think about my age. Maybe I had missed something. I even started testing myself. I balanced my checkbook twice. I checked the calendar. I drove to Kroger without GPS just because I could. It was absurd. Then Tuesday afternoon, a man from church stopped me outside the post office. Bob, good to see you out. I frowned. Good to be out. He lowered his voice. Everything going okay? Why wouldn't it be? His face told me enough. That evening, I nearly called Emily. I wanted to demand names. I wanted to ask why she was telling people I couldn't take care of myself. Instead, I called Daniel. I want to update everything. There was a pause. You sure know, but I want to protect myself while I figure out whether I should be. The next morning, I sat across from him with a legal pad between us. Daniel pulled up my financial records. Then he looked over his glasses. Before we decide what changes to make, Bob, there's something your daughter clearly doesn't understand. What's that? He turned his monitor toward me. The difference between retiring and being broke. And that was when the conversation changed completely. Daniel turned his monitor toward me. I knew the numbers. Of course I did. But seeing everything together on one screen made even me sit back. You're not broke, Bob, he said. I never said I was. No, you said I'll manage. Apparently your daughter translated that differently. I almost smiled. Almost. When I sold Mercer Commercial Electric to Caleb, I sold the operating business. The truck's equipment, customer contracts, and company name went into a structured buyout that would pay me monthly for several years. But the warehouse, I still owned it. Mercer Electric paid rent to an LLC, Marianne, and I had established years earlier. There were also 2 small commercial properties south of Nashville. Nothing glamorous. One was a brick building with a dental office and an insurance agency. The other had 3 storefronts, including a dry cleaner that had been there since Clinton was president. Marianne had pushed me to buy both. Land doesn't call in sick, she used to say. Between those properties, retirement accounts, investments, cash reserves, the business payments in my house, Daniel estimated my net worth at roughly $4.2 million, not private jet money, but considerably better than eating canned beans because Social Security was late. Does Emily know about the properties, Daniel asked. She knows I bought some real estate years ago. I doubt she knows I still own it. And the terms of Caleb's buyout. No, Daniel leaned back, so she assumed. Looks that way. What bothered me wasn't that Emily had underestimated my finances. It was what she'd done because of that assumption. If I had actually been broke, would that have made it acceptable to stop calling me? That question followed me home. 2 days later, Daniel and I began updating my estate plan. I changed the people authorized to act for me if I became incapacitated. I also created clearer safeguards around my financial accounts and property. The biggest change involved Sophie. I had always planned to leave a substantial amount to Emily, figuring she would eventually pass it down to her daughter. That no longer seemed wise. So Daniel drafted a trust for Sophie, education, medical needs, a first home someday within reasonable limits. Emily and Jason would not control it. You realize Emily may see this as punishment, Daniel said. Is it? You tell me. I looked out his window at people walking along Main Street. I don't know yet. And that was the truth. Part of me wanted to punish her. I hated admitting that. I wanted Emily to discover exactly what she'd walked away from. I wanted her to understand that the father she had quietly categorized as a future burden had spent decades building something solid. Then I would picture her at 8 years old sitting on my shoulders at the Williamson County Fair, or 16 crying after her first breakup, or standing beside Marianne at my 50th birthday, both of them laughing because they'd put 50 candles on a cake barely big enough for 20. Anger is simple until you remember who you're angry with. Then the rumors started reaching me directly. At Walgreens one morning, I ran into Carol Bennett from church. She touched my arm. Bob, how are you doing? Pretty good. You look good. I smiled. Was I expected not to? Her expression changed. That was the third conversation like that in 2 weeks. At church the following Sunday, a man I'd known for 15 years offered to drive me home. I have my truck. Oh, sure. I just thought maybe. He didn't finish. I went home furious. I picked up my phone and pulled up Emily's number. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wanted to call her and say things I couldn't take back. Instead, I grabbed my keys. Marianne was buried at Williamson Memorial Gardens. I stopped at Publix for flowers, then drove over. It was a clear Tennessee afternoon, cool enough for a jacket. I sat on the bench near her grave. For a while, I didn't say anything. Then I finally spoke. I don't know what happened to our girl Mare. Saying it out loud broke something loose in me. I had spent weeks treating this like a financial problem. It wasn't. I miss my daughter, and I miss the person I thought she was. I stayed almost an hour. When I got home, Frank was standing in my driveway. Where were you, cemetery? He immediately stopped joking. You okay? Not really. We sat on my porch. I told him about the rumors. Frank listened, then stood. Okay, what we're doing? We're doing a cognitive evaluation. I stared at him. You delivered mail for 37 years. Exactly. Government trained. He pointed at me. What year is it? 2026. Who's president? I answered. He nodded gravely. Last question. Who owes me $20 from bowling? You owe me 40. Frank slapped his knee. Excellent. Brain works fine. I laughed for the first time all day. Then my phone buzzed. Emily. The message was short. We need a family meeting. I'm bringing an attorney this time. This has gone far enough. Frank read my face. When I handed him the phone, he whistled. Well. She brought artillery. I took the phone back. Something had changed in me at Marianne's grave. I didn't want to destroy Emily, but I was done defending myself against whispers. I typed Thursday, 2 p.m. My house. Then I called Daniel. She's bringing a lawyer. When Thursday? Daniel paused. Would you like me there? Yes. This time I didn't hesitate. Thursday morning I cleaned the house. Not because it needed cleaning. I needed something to do. At noon, Daniel arrived carrying his briefcase. We sat at my dining room table. I placed 2 folders in front of us. The first contained the papers Emily had wanted me to sign. The second contained my new estate documents. Daniel looked at them. You don't have to show her everything. I know. You also don't have to tell her what you're worth. I know that too. He studied me. What do you want out of this meeting that was harder? Finally, I said I want my daughter to tell me the truth. At 1:57 p.m., tires rolled across my driveway. Through the front window, I watched a black Lexus stop behind Daniel's car. Emily got out first. Jason came in around the passenger side. Then a woman I didn't recognize stepped from the back seat carrying a leather portfolio. Daniel quietly closed his briefcase. I heard footsteps approaching the porch. For months, Emily had believed she was coming to rescue an old man who couldn't manage his own life. In about 30 seconds, she was going to discover that old man had been preparing for her. The doorbell rang. The doorbell rang again before I reached the foyer. When I opened the door, Emily was standing there with Jason and a woman I'd never met. "Hi, Dad." "Emily." Jason gave me a short nod. The woman extended her hand. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Melissa Grant. Come in." Emily walked ahead of her like she still knew exactly how the afternoon would go. Then she reached the dining room. She saw Daniel and stopped. "Mr. Reeves." Daniel stood. "Hello, Emily." Her face changed so quickly I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She looked at me. "What is he doing here?" Daniel answered before I could. "Bob asked me to attend." Melissa glanced from Daniel to me. "You're representing Mr. Mercer. I've represented Bob for 25 years. That sentence changed the room. Melissa's posture became more careful. Jason pulled out a chair. "Can we just get this over with?" I sat across from Emily. "You requested the meeting." Emily placed her purse beside her chair. "We're here because we're worried about you." Daniel didn't move. I said, "Go ahead." Emily looked at Melissa. Melissa opened her portfolio. "My understanding is that your daughter has concerns about your ability to manage certain financial and household matters." "What concerns?" Emily answered. "You've been forgetting things, such as," she hesitated, "appointments." "Which appointments? You forgot dinner with us." I remembered immediately. That was in January. Jason's mother changed the reservation from 6:30 to 5:30. Jason shifted in his chair. Emily tried again. "You've become isolated." "My wife died." Her eyes dropped. I hated using Marianne that way, but it was true. After 39 years of marriage, loneliness wasn't proof of incompetence. Melissa looked at her notes. "Have you experienced difficulty paying bills?" "No." "Any recent accidents?" "No." "Have you become lost while driving?" "No." Emily interrupted. "This isn't a courtroom." Daniel finally spoke. "No, it isn't. Which makes me curious why you brought an attorney." Emily looked at him. "I'm trying to protect my father." From what nobody answered. Daniel opened the blue folder Emily had left at my house. Melissa immediately recognized it. "May I see that?" Daniel handed it across. She read several pages. Her expression stayed professional, but I noticed she slowed down. "Emily," she said, "did your father request this power of attorney?" "No." "Did a physician recommend that someone assume responsibility for his financial affairs?" "No." "But has he been diagnosed with any cognitive impairment?" "No." Melissa closed the folder. That was when I understood something. Emily's own attorney had not been given the whole story. I leaned forward. "Emily, why have you been telling people I can't take care of myself?" She stared at me. "I haven't." "My sister, Linda." Silence. "Carol Bennett." Emily looked toward Jason. "People talk. They're repeating something." Jason exhaled. Bob, nobody's trying to hurt you." I turned to him. "Then explain it." He leaned back. "We thought you were struggling. With what money? Finally." There it was. Emily spoke quickly. "After you sold the company, you wouldn't tell me anything. You kept saying you'd manage. Because I am managing. You're 67, Dad. What happens if something goes wrong? I call somebody. That isn't a plan. No giving you control of everything because you brought me banana bread isn't a plan." Daniel coughed into his fist. Melissa looked down, but I caught the smallest smile. Emily didn't. "This isn't funny." "No," I said. "It isn't." I pulled the blue folder toward me. "You stopped calling. You stopped coming over. Then you started telling people I was confused. After that, you brought me documents giving you broad control over my property and accounts. I was trying to help. Why didn't you ask me what I needed?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I asked again. Why? Emily's voice dropped. "Because you would have said nothing. That's my right." Jason leaned forward. "We didn't want this house becoming another problem." The room went completely still. I looked at him. Another problem. He realized immediately that he'd said too much. Emily closed her eyes. "Jason, what he said. We've all been thinking it." No, I said. Apparently you two have. Jason started explaining. If you couldn't keep up with the taxes, maintenance, insurance, the house is paid off. He stopped. Emily looked at me. What? No mortgage, but you refinanced years ago and paid it off. Her expression shifted. I could see her recalculating. I hated seeing it. Daniel had warned me not to turn the meeting into a financial performance, and suddenly I understood why. If I started listing assets, I would be doing exactly what Emily had done, measuring the relationship in dollars. Still, one fact needed saying. I also still own the warehouse. Emily blinked. The Mercer building. Yes. I thought that went with the company. It didn't. Jason sat straighter. What else did you keep? I looked at him. He knew immediately that was the wrong question. Then Emily asked the one that hurt most. How much are we talking about? Not are you safe? Not why didn't you tell me? How much? I stared at my daughter. Daniel said nothing. Melissa said nothing. Finally, I answered. That question is exactly why we're sitting here. Emily's face reddened. I didn't mean it like that. I think you did. She pushed her chair back. So what, this is some test? You let me think you were broke. I never told you I was broke. You knew what I thought. I knew after you stopped showing up. That silenced her. For a moment, she wasn't an angry 38-year-old woman. She looked like the little girl who used to sit at the kitchen counter while Marianne packed her lunch. And I nearly backed down. I nearly told her everything was okay, but everything wasn't okay. I reached for the second folder. My estate plan has changed. Emily stared at it. What does that mean? It means nobody gets control over my life because they expect to inherit it. Jason stood. This is ridiculous. Melissa turned to him. Mr. Carter, sit down. To my surprise, he did. I explained that I had appointed independent people to handle my affairs. If I genuinely became unable to do so, Sophie's future would be protected. Emily would not control that money. Her eyes filled. You're punishing me. Maybe part of me wanted to. That admission surprised everyone, including me, but mostly I'm protecting myself. Emily wiped beneath one eye. Daniel closed his folder. I could have ended it there. But the rumors had traveled farther than this dining room. So I told Emily there would be another conversation on Sunday afternoon. With who? The people you've been talking to. Her head snapped up. You're going to humiliate me in front of the family? No, I stood. I'm going to correct the story in front of the same people who heard it. Emily looked at me for a long time. Then she picked up her purse. At the doorway, she turned. Dad, please don't do this. 6 months earlier, that sentence might have stopped me. This time it didn't. Sunday, I said. 3 o'clock. After they left, Daniel stayed behind. He looked at the closed front door, then at me. You all right? I sat down slowly. No, and I wasn't. Winning an argument against your own child doesn't feel much like winning. But Sunday wasn't going to be about winning. It was going to be about making sure everyone finally heard the truth. Sunday afternoon, I arrived at the church community room 40 minutes early. I had considered holding the meeting at my house, but I didn't want the place where Marianne and I had built our life turning into a courtroom. So I reserved the small room behind our church. Nothing fancy. Folding tables, beige walls, a coffee maker that had probably survived 3 pastors. I brought a tray of cookies from Publix and set out paper cups. Frank arrived first. He looked around. Cookies. People behave better when they're eating. Congress should try that. Daniel came in carrying 1 folder. At 3 o'clock, everyone was there. My sister Linda sat beside Frank. 2 cousins who had heard the rumors came too. Susan arrived wearing enough perfume to announce herself from the parking lot. Then Emily and Jason walked in. Emily saw everyone and stopped. You actually did this. I said I would. This is humiliating. I kept my voice low. Emily, you told people I couldn't manage my own life. I'm telling those same people that I can. Jason muttered something. Susan immediately said, What was that? Nothing, Mom. Sounded like something. Jason closed his eyes. For once, I appreciated Susan. We sat down. I didn't make a speech. I simply told everyone why they were there. Some of you have heard that I'm having memory problems or financial trouble. Neither is true. Linda looked uncomfortable. I continued. I'm not angry at anyone here for believing they were helping, but I don't want people making decisions about me based on information that isn't accurate. Daniel spoke next. He didn't disclose my finances. He simply confirmed that I was managing my affairs independently, that there was no medical finding of incapacity, and that my estate planning had been updated voluntarily. Emily crossed her arms. This is unnecessary. I looked at her. It became necessary when people started asking if I was safe to drive. Her eyes dropped. Then Daniel explained that I had chosen independent safeguards if I ever genuinely became incapacitated. Nobody in the room needed numbers. But Emily did need to understand one thing. I'm not broke, I said. Jason shifted. I continued. I still own property. I receive income from the company sale. My retirement is funded. Susan blinked. I knew it. Jason stared at her. You knew what well I didn't know. But Bob never looked broke. Frank leaned toward her. What does broke look like? Susan thought seriously. I don't know. Worse shoes. Even Emily almost smiled. The tension lasted only a second. Then she looked at me. So you changed your will? Yes. How Sophie's future inheritance is protected through a trust. Emily sat straighter. You don't trust me with my own daughter. This isn't about parenting Sophie. Then what is it about money? Jason spoke. So you're cutting Emily out. No, sounds like it. I looked directly at him. I'm cutting entitlement out. Nobody moved. Even Susan stayed quiet. I explained that I had added charitable gifts in Marianne's memory and changed who would manage my affairs if I became unable to do it myself. Emily would no longer automatically control everything. Her eyes filled. You planned to leave most of it to me. I did. And now I'm making decisions based on what I've learned. She looked around the room. This is revenge. That word hit me harder than I expected, because part of her was right. There had been nights when I'd imagined this moment. Emily discovering I had money, Emily realizing what she'd risked losing, Emily feeling ashamed. But sitting there watching my daughter fight tears, the fantasy didn't feel satisfying. I leaned forward. Do you want to know what actually hurt? She didn't answer. When you thought I had nothing, you disappeared? Her face crumpled slightly. That's not fair. Then tell me what happened. She shook her head. Jason stared at the table. Finally, Susan spoke. Well, you did say you were hoping to redo the kitchen after you got Bob's house. Jason's head snapped toward her. Mom. Emily went white. Susan. Susan looked confused. What I told you that privately. You told me not to tell Bob. Susan glanced around. You didn't say I couldn't tell everybody else. Frank made a choking noise into his coffee. I bit the inside of my cheek. It wasn't funny. Unfortunately, it was also very funny. Emily covered her face. Can we please go? No, I said gently. Not yet. She lowered her hands. Were you planning on my house? Tears spilled down her cheeks. For several seconds she said nothing. Then Jason answered. We're in trouble. Emily shot him a look. He kept going. My commissions dropped last year, badly. They had refinanced their house. Then credit cards started carrying balances. One card became 3. Jason had leased a Lexus because clients expected him to look successful. They were spending thousands every month maintaining a life they couldn't afford. Emily wiped her face. We thought eventually. She couldn't finish. Eventually I'd die, I asked. No, then say it. She looked at me. We thought eventually the estate would fix things. There it was. Not a villain's master plan. Something sadder, fear mixed with entitlement. I sat back. You could have told me you were struggling. Jason looked away. You could have asked for advice. Emily whispered I was embarrassed. So instead you decided I was worth more incompetent than independent. The room became silent. Emily started crying. I didn't enjoy it. That surprised me. I had wanted accountability. I hadn't wanted my daughter broken, so I changed direction. I'm not paying your credit cards. Jason looked up. I didn't ask good. Frank hid another smile. But Daniel knows a nonprofit credit counselor in Nashville. If you want help making a real plan, I'll arrange the meeting. Emily stared at me. No money, no money. Susan nodded. Take the meeting. Jason frowned. She pointed at him. Considering your visa bill, Jason, I'd sit down. That got a few laughs. Even Emily gave a small, miserable one. Afterward, people left quietly. Emily stayed behind. I was stacking paper cups when she approached me. Dad, I turned. Her eyes were red. Did you ever really need me? That question hurt more than anything said all afternoon. I set the cups down. Every father needs his daughter. She looked at me. Just not for the reason you thought. She started crying again. This time I hugged her. But I didn't promise to change the trust. I didn't promise money, and I didn't tell her everything was forgotten. Some things shouldn't be repaired in a single afternoon. As I drove home, I realized the hardest part was still ahead. Exposing the truth had taken one Sunday. Figuring out whether we could become a family again would take much longer. The first time Emily called after that Sunday, I let the phone ring 3 times before I answered. That bothered me. Not because I almost missed the call, because 6 months earlier I would have answered before the second ring. Hi, Dad. Hey, Em. There was a pause. I was wondering if you wanted lunch. My first thought embarrassed me. What does she want? I hated that suspicion had become automatic. Lunch sounds good. We met 2 days later at a little diner off Columbia Avenue. Emily was already sitting in a booth when I arrived. No lawyer, no folder, no banana bread, just Emily. We talked about Sophie's school, the Titans, and a plumbing problem at her house. When the check came, Emily reached for it. I've got mine. You don't have to. I know. She put her card down. It was such a small thing. But after everything that had happened, small things mattered. Rebuilding trust didn't happen in one conversation. Some weeks Emily called twice, other weeks only once. There were moments when I wondered whether she was being nice because she now knew I wasn't broke. I never asked. Instead, I watched what she did. She and Jason met with the credit counselor Daniel recommended. Jason hated it. I know because he told me. This woman wants us to write down every dollar we spend. I stared at him. That sounds like budgeting. She called my Lexus unnecessary. Sounds like a smart woman. 3 weeks later, Jason sold the Lexus. He replaced it with a 4-year-old Toyota Camry. Frank nearly drove onto my lawn when he saw it. Bob, what? Jason bought a Toyota. So he lowered his voice. I think your church meeting caused a miracle. I laughed. Jason didn't find that story nearly as funny when I told him. Their problems didn't disappear. They had credit card debt, a second mortgage, and habits that had taken years to build. Emily started bringing lunch to work instead of buying it every day. They canceled a vacation to Florida. Jason picked up smaller commercial listings he'd once considered beneath him. Sometimes they argued. Once Emily called me crying after a fight about money. My old instinct was to offer help. I could have written a check and made several problems disappear. Instead, I listened. Then I said, do you want advice or do you just need your dad? She went quiet. My dad. So I listened some more. That may have been the first conversation in years where money wasn't hiding somewhere underneath it. Sophie started spending more Saturdays with me. One morning she came into my garage while I was sanding a piece of maple. Can I make something? What I don't know. Excellent planning. We settled on a small bookshelf. She measured twice and still cut one board wrong. I told her that officially qualified her for construction work. Around lunchtime, she asked me something without looking up. Grandpa, are you rich? The question nearly made me drop my pencil. Who told you that Mom said you're better with money than everybody thought? I sat on my stool. Children deserve honest answers, but they don't need adult burdens. I have enough. How much is enough? That depends on what you need. She thought about that. Can we get pizza? Yes. Then you have enough. Hard to argue with 11-year-old economics. By summer, Emily and I were doing better. Not fixed, better. There's a difference. One Saturday morning, she stopped by while I was drinking coffee on the porch. She handed me an envelope. What's this? Read it later. Then she left. I opened it after lunch. It was 3 handwritten pages. Emily wrote that after Marianne died, she'd started thinking of me as the person who kept everything stable. When something broke, I fixed it. When somebody needed money, I usually found it. When she believed that security was gone, fear had turned into resentment. Then resentment turned into distance. One sentence stopped me. I started treating you like an obligation before you ever asked me for anything. I read that line 3 times, then another. I hate admitting that, but pretending otherwise would just be another lie. I sat at the kitchen table and cried, quietly. At 67, you learn that apologies don't erase things, but a real apology can give you somewhere to begin. A week later, I met Daniel. Changing your mind, he asked. Not exactly. The trust for Sophie stayed. The independent safeguards stayed. I did revise one provision, so Emily would eventually receive a modest amount directly. Not enough to solve every future mistake. Enough to tell her she was still my daughter. I didn't tell her the amount. I didn't want another dollar figure sitting between us. In October, on the anniversary of Marianne's death, Emily came with me to the cemetery. We brought yellow roses. Emily stood beside her mother's grave for a long time. Finally, she said Mom would have been furious with me. I smiled. She would have made you a casserole first. Emily laughed through her tears. And then she would have been furious. We stayed until the afternoon started cooling off. Driving home, I thought about revenge. For a while, I had wanted Emily to feel exactly what she'd made me feel. Ignored. Embarrassed. Unimportant. But when I finally had the chance to hurt her, I discovered something. Protecting myself felt better than destroying her. I didn't need to make my daughter poor. I didn't need to wave bank statements in her face. I needed her to understand that my age did not make my independence negotiable, and my money did not determine whether I deserved a phone call. A few weeks later, I was sitting on my porch with coffee when my phone rang. Emily. A year earlier, seeing her name would have made me smile immediately. 6 months earlier, it would have tightened my stomach. That morning, it simply felt normal. I answered. Morning, kiddo. Hey, Dad, you free for lunch? What do you want? She went silent. I smiled. I'm kidding. You're not funny. Frank thinks I am. Frank also wears socks with sandals. Fair point. She laughed. And that was it. No house, no will, no money, just lunch. Getting older doesn't mean handing someone else the keys to your life. Love your family, forgive when forgiveness is earned, but don't confuse love with surrendering your dignity. If you've ever had to set a boundary with someone you love, I hope this story reminds you that protecting yourself doesn't mean you stopped caring. And if it meant something to you, you're welcome to share your own thoughts and experiences. Sometimes the best revenge isn't watching someone lose. It's getting your peace back. The end.